get busy. In my book, I wrote, are we ready? Good. In my book, I crossed out Bill's name and wrote my name, because this is my story. War fever ran high in the New England town, which we young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned. We were flattered, that's to be on an emotional high, when the first citizens took us into their homes, making us feel heroic. Here was love, applause, war, moments sublime, with intervals hilarious. Bill is a young officer. He's 22 years old, and he is going off to World War I, and people treated folks going off to war very well. Here's how he felt about it. I was part of life at last, and in the midst of my excitement, I discovered liquor. Now look at this word. I forgot. What does it mean to forget? Isn't when we forget something, it's the inability to recall with sufficient force of memory what happened the last time we took a drink? Bill is going to tell us right in the beginning of the story, he forgets. He can't recall because he's living out of the ism thoughts already. He's already starting to develop a way that he's not going to look sanely at alcohol. The strong warning and prejudice of my people. That's Grandpa Willie. His grandfather raised him and had a experience before his death. I think it was 7 or 10 years before he died, where he'd gone up to the mountaintop in Vermont and cried out to God to heal his alcoholism, and he did. And Bill remembers this. I forgot the warning and prejudice of my people concerning drink. Grandpa warned him. In time, I sailed over there. He went to London, where the war was. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. Look at that. He's now using alcohol to change the way he feels. So he's drinking. It's a party. Feels good. And now he's over there and he's alone and he's afraid and he turns to it to change the way he feels. He's turning up the heat. We landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. I was much moved by a dog rail outside. I was much moved and wandered outside. My attention was caught by a dog rail on an old tombstone. A dog rail is a poem. Winchester Cathedral is a big, beautiful church in London, and there's a graveyard in the back of it. And that's where he ends up. And it says, here lies Humphrey Grenadier, who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier near forgot whether he dies by musket or pot. So he's reading a tombstone. He's drunk. Anybody ever wandered around a cemetery drunk? Yeah, come on. He's wandering around this cemetery drunk, reading tombstones, feeling sorry for himself. He's afraid because he's about to go off to war. And he reads this thing, and it's like, boom, still small voice. Don't go that way, Bill. Ominous warning. Now, what's he do? Which I failed to heed. Now, in the next couple of pages, Bill's going to get into his selfishness. So I'm going to just jump from here for a minute, and it says to go look at the strange mental blank spot on page 240. We're going to do that on the next page, but I marked it in my book as a point of interest. Because the way the Fat Book is written, you'll see the same thing repeated on the right-hand side, and depending on who you read it to, it will determine when you jump into something. Like, how much are they connecting? If somebody's really tuned in and connecting, you might want to jump there right away. If not, when you get to that page, put your finger here and turn to page 240 for just 1 second, and then we're going to turn right back without reading it all. But if you look on the top of the page, it's titled The Strange Mental Blank Spot. Look at how many times Bill Wilson talks about it. This is the spiritual malady. Page 1, 5, 6, 8, 11, 21, 24, 31, 33, 37, 40, 42, 92, 107, 138, 152, 155. And if you read this, it will talk about the things that I already discussed, and tomorrow I'll take the time to read through this with you. But right now I just marked it in my book as a point of interest. Some people will be so hungry that you could take them there, and others won't. Remember, when you read this book, you're not just reading it for yourself, you're reading it for the man that you will help, more importantly. To master this book means that you can help another alcoholic out of his ism. Now he's going to jump into his selfish, self-centered nature. He's going to tell us precisely what happened. But before, on the A side over there, bullet number 2, Bill's Winchester Cathedral experience describes in more detail and pass it on. Inside the great cathedral, he was moved and stirred by a tremendous sense of presence. For the brief moment, I had needed and wanted God there. had been a humble willingness to have him, and he came. So Bill makes an encounter with God. Now, some of you might know about the parable of the sower. The seed did not hit good soil. Immediately, he moves back into the things that he's doing. But it says that he wanted to know God. Bill had an overwhelming fundamental nature inside of him that wanted to connect with God. He just kept turning away from it. 22 and a veteran of foreign wars. I went home at last. I fancied myself a leader, for had not the men in my battery given me a special token of appreciation, my talent for leadership, I imagined, would place me at the head of a vast enterprise, which I would manage with the utmost assurance. Now, I put boxes around all the I's. Bill's a very, very good writer. He does this 2 or 3 times in the book, where he uses the pronoun I excessively. He's pointing out our self-centered nature. Everything's going to be all about Bill. So I'm going to just rip through this as quickly as I can and tell the story, but I'm going to just point that out. I took a night law course and obtained employment as an investor for a surety company. The drive for success was on. Cattle are driven. To be driven is to be without a choice. Surety companies checked people out, make sure that they were of good nature. He's like an investigator in business. I'd proved to the world that I was important. My work took me about Wall Street, and little by little, I became interested in the market. So as he's working for the surety company, he's checking people out for Wall Street. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? I studied economics and business as well as the law. Potential alcoholic I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. We had long talks when I would still her foreboding. He'd talk her into the fact that there was nothing wrong by telling her that men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk. I was a great driver, too. Anybody drive well when they were drunk? Forget the drunk driving's over and over. That the most majestic, constructive, philosophical thought was so derived. By the time I had completed the course, I knew that law was not for me. The inviting maelstrom, so it's pulling at him, of Wall Street, had me in its grip. Now remember what I said out of the book of Corinthians, right? We can do all things. There's no prohibition against drinking in God's world unless it gets you in its grip, unless you can't stop when you want to, unless you have that allergic body. You turn away from it and life is good. But that didn't happen for me, and it didn't happen for Bill, and it sure didn't happen for you all either. Business and financial leaders were my hero. Out of this alloy of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that would one day turn in full flight like a boomerang and cut me to ribbons. Living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000, and I went into certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular. I rightly imagined that they would someday have great rise. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking at factories and managements. But my wife and I decided to go anyway. Now, Bill, they refer to him as a stockbroker all the time. This activity that he just described today would be called investment banking, where guys go out, you got a company, you want to raise money, guys from Wall Street come out, they check you out, they figure out if they can sell your stock, and they help you raise money. Bill pioneered that. He was one smart cookie. I had developed a theory that most people lost money in stocks through ignorance of the market. I discovered more reasons why later on. Now watch what happens. Anybody in here ever take a hostage in your drinking? He's about to go out on the road and he's full of fear that things aren't going to go right. Now watch this next paragraph. He's taken Lois hostage, gave up our positions, and off we roared on a motorcycle. Can you imagine? The sidecar was stuffed with a tent and blankets. Come on, Lois, hop in the bike. We're going to go drive around the East Coast in the winter. Change of clothes, 3 huge volumes of financial reference services. Our friends thought a lunacy should be appointed. Perhaps they were right. I had some success at speculation. Now he's gambling on stocks. So we had a little money. But we once worked on a farm for a month. And that guy's name is over there. It's just a little fact. Dick Johnson was where they hung out. To avoid drawing on our small capital. That was the last honest manual labor on my part. Now look at, here we go, back to the we. We covered the whole eastern United States in a year. Can you imagine on a motorcycle with nothing but a tent with your wife going up and down the East Coast? That includes December, January. It's cold. It's wet. It's rainy. He's nuts. But doesn't that just sounds like such a great idea? Huh. Crazy. At the end, my reports to Wall Street procured me. Here we are, back to me. What happened to Lois? A position there, and used a large expense account. The exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several $1,000s. So if you don't know what an option is, I'm going to explain it real quick. If you have a company and your stock is worth $10 and you do a little bit of work for me, I can give you an option to buy it at that price in the future. Or I could give it to you at a discounted price to buy it. So if I give you an option in my stock and I say you can buy my stock for the next 2 years at $10 a share, and it gets traded publicly and it goes up to $20 a share, you double your money. So when you exercise an option, what you're doing is you're getting paid the difference between the value when it was issued and the value today, and you didn't have to put up money normally. Anyway, for the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. Look at Bill, what a stallion. My judgment and ideas were followed by the tune of paper millions. Bill made a ton of money, as did his friends. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. First progression. Bill's going to take us through 12 progressions of alcoholism on the next 2 pages. Drinking was taking a more important and exhilarating part of my life. Drinking becomes a priority. Now he's got success. I went out there. I did it. I'm smart. I'm going to drink. There was loud talk, because I can, at the jazz places uptown. Everyone spent in thousands and chatters in millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair weather friends. Those are your friends on Facebook. My drinking assumed a more serious proportion and continued all day and almost every night. Next progression. My friends terminated in a row. We begin to isolate. I became a lone wolf. There were many unhappy scenes at our sumptuous apartment. There had been no real infidelity. What was he, a minor infidelity? I don't know what that means, real infidelity. But for loyalty to my wife, helped at times by extreme drunkenness, kept me out of those scrapes. In 1929, I contracted Gulf fever. So he is high-rolling. He is doing good. He is having a good time with alcohol. Everything is going Bill's way. Now he's just going to spend his money. We went at once to the country, my wife to applaud, while I started to overtake Walter Hagen. Walter Hagen, if you don't know, is like Tiger Woods of the 20s. Liquor caught up with me faster than I came up behind Walter, so liquor starts tearing apart. I began to be jittery in the morning. Anybody ever feel like they had the flu after a night drinking? Yeah, that's the DTs. You overdosed. Golf permitted drinking every day and almost every night. It was fun to corral around those exclusive courses, which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. I acquired an impeccable coat of tan that one would see on the well-to-do. The local bankers watched me whirl fat checks in and out of the till with amused skepticism. Looks more like a modern-day dope dealer, right? Abruptly, now here comes the first crisis in his life. Problems come. So drinking's good, and then a problem comes. Think about your first crisis in your life from drinking. In October of 1929, all hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from the hotel bar to the brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market had closed. The ticker was chattering. I was staring at an inch of tape which bore the inscription XYZ32. It had been 52 in that morning. Let me explain this to you real quick. Back in those days, we didn't have a computer, we didn't have the internet. There was no Charles Schwab E-Trade or any of those things. What happened was there were little shops set up all over the place. They looked like a 7-Eleven. You could walk in there, and they had a little machine called a ticker tape. And that little ticker tape was getting the changes in stock prices all over the place. It'd come out on a little tape, and you could find out what a stock price was, and you could buy it. So when it says it bore the inscription XYZ, it'll tell you on the other side if you're interested who the company is. 32, it had been 52 in the morning. That means that stock dropped 40% in its value. Now, when you buy stock, and I don't know that they did this, but you can buy stock, you can buy it on what's called the margin. You can borrow money. Like you can just go and borrow on your credit card. What happens if you owe $10,000 on your credit card and they call you up and say it's due and you don't have $10,000? You're done. Well, what if they do that with your car and they say it's due? Well, they come take your car. Well, what if they do that with your house? They take your house. Come take it. Well, when you buy on the margin, you place your stock up as collateral. So if a lender looks at that stock and says, hey, it's down, they might have called it, and all of a sudden, people got a bad problem because they don't have money to pay. It dropped 40% and it continued to drop because you can't get out of it. When stocks drop, you got to go for the ride. If you don't have money to carry you through as long as it takes, you got to sell that stock. If you sell that stock, you lose all your money. And the lenders make sure they're collateralized. They got enough. So this is a really big deal. And this happened around 07 too. Same sort of thing happened. Market had the Great Recession. I was finished, and so were many of my friends. The papers reported men jumping to their deaths at the Tower of High Finance. That disgusted me. I would not jump. Here's Bill's solution. I went back to the bar. Yeah, baby, I might be broke, but I'm going to fight. Give me a beer. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. Now here's the next progression. So what? He's developed an attitude that is uncaring. Tomorrow was another day, and I drank. The old fierce determination to win came back. When you got problems in your life and you start drinking, you felt like you could beat them, and 2 or 3 days later they didn't feel so bad, except now you're drinking all the time and the problem was still there. The next morning I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left, and I thought I had better go to Canada. People did the same thing in 2007 when the market dropped. The Canadian banking system is very different than ours. So when we have bank crises, they often don't have them, or at least in these two events. So he goes up there and he starts doing the same thing in Canada that he was doing in New York. By the following spring, I was living in my accustomed lifestyle. I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. He gets exiled to Alba and he gets back, right? No St. Helena for me. On that one, Napoleon didn't make it. But drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. This time we stayed broke. Boom. Who got broke? We. Take that hostage, baby. We're broke now. Let's go, Lois. We went to live with my parents, and I found a job, then lost it as a result of the bra. So now here's another progression. He's becoming very helpless, right? Boom, he has to go live with his parents. With a taxi driver. Mercifully, no one would guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years or hardly draw a sober breath. He is powerless. Bill is describing the powerless nature of what he's got going on. My wife began to work in a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. That's a bit of powerlessness, don't you think? I became an unwelcome hanger-on at the brokerage places. Remember, I just described those brokerage places? Charles Schwab used to have those all over town. I did a deal with Charles Schwab back in the 90s. They used to call the guys that showed up there lobby rats. They showed up every day gambling on stocks, and they just went there. And then the internet came, and they're at home doing that or wherever they're doing it now. But it was a thing where people would go to these brokerage things just like you go to the racetrack. You know, there's a bit of gambling involved in that kind of speculation. Here comes the next progression. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day and often 3, got to be the routine. Another progression. Our normal drinking. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bar and the delicatessens. The lady who was talking about drugs during the break. You ever go pay off the dealer when you got a little money? Yeah. This went on endlessly. And then I began to awaken very early in the morning, shaking violently, DTs. A tumble full of gin, followed by a half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I was to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, check this out. I still thought I could control the situation. Write in your margin, delusional thinking. The belief in the illusion that I can control my drinking. I still thought I could control. It's the belief in the delusion. And there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. We put together a little bit of time. All good. We see lots of people do it. The real alcoholic generally shorter than the problem drinkers. But we watch people do this and they drink again and you scratch your head. That may have been even you in the past. Gradually, things got worse. Here comes more crisis. We start to lose things and people. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at a low point in 1932. This is 3 years later. He's drinking good. I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Going to make a little bit of a commish if things go well. Then I went on a prodigious bender. Boom. It's living in this unnatural state. The thought of drink came and he couldn't stop it. He drank the next day. He didn't have to stay sober very long. He couldn't do it long enough to put his deal back together. Now he's chasing the things of the world, and the things of the world he can't catch. Now it's getting really bad. Money, property, and prestige. Can't get him there. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was, though, forever before then. I had written sweet promises. Bill used to write dates that he'd stop drinking in the family Bible. Now he realizes he can't take a drop. Now, if Bill did not have the spiritual malady and he were merely a hard drinker, he could have probably stopped. But Bill is going to describe the mental break right now. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? No action followed. See, after we're justified, we need to take action to be sanctified, right? After we take step 3, we got to do 4 through 9 to get to the other side. I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. I want you to put your finger right there, and I want to turn to page 240. And I'm going to probably introduce this concept, and we'll wrap it up, and then we'll get going. So turn to page 240. I want to get to the heart of the matter here. This is a little page that I wrote called The Strange Mental Blank Spot. And like I said when we began, I run out of room sometimes on the pages. And I point people back to the center section of the book to expand on certain things. This is one of the most important parts of the big book in understanding alcoholism. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. That happens on page 64. The strange mental blank spot is what separates the real alcoholic from all other types of drinkers. You can read that on page 20 through 24. It is the evidence of the spiritual malady or the spiritual death has occurred. In section 151.2, Bill uses the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse to describe the type of malady. But why does this malady or death create an inability to remember why we can't drink? Now, we got a finger on page 5. You got a finger on page 240. Now I want you to go to page 151. This is how we learn. In the vision for you, Bill describes the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Anybody know where that comes from? It comes out of Revelation, the 6th chapter, verses 1 through 8. And each one of those horsemen, when you read about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, has a meaning. And Bill pulls in from the book of Revelation into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he defines these things. And here he says in paragraph 2, the less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself. We became subjects of King Alcohol. King Alcohol. Alcohol is now his master, his lord. Shivering denizens. Denizens are citizens that have no rights. You do whatever it tells you to do. King Alcohol tells you what to do and you do it. This mad realm, the chilling vapor and the loneliness settled down. It thickened, ever becoming blacker. Some of us sought sordid places, hoping we could find an understanding, companionship, and approval. Momentarily we did, and then would come oblivion. That's where we like to drink to, at the end, oblivion. And then the awful awakening to face the hideous Four Horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. Now look over on the other page, and this comes out of the definitions when you read in the book of Revelation. The white horse is the knowledge that we are conquered and defeated. When you read that story, that's what it's talking about. The red horse is conflict with no solution. Our conflict with alcohol, we could find no solution. It becomes bewildering. The black horse, we're broke and we cannot even take care of our basic needs. We have trouble in our lives. And then the pale horse, the rider whose name is death, death of the soul. John in Revelation is describing how all men suffer in their separation from God. It's that death, that soul death, that causes a strange mental blank spot. The inability to recall with sufficient force of memory is because I have no connection to the only thing that can keep me from the drink. Bill uses very interesting choices of words. You should study that. Take a peek. Let's go back to page 240. Keep your finger on page 5. Let's start with what the Bible teaches in the book of Romans. We are told that the wages of sin are death, and it tells you where that is in Romans, and it tells you then where to find it in the Fat Book, page 366. And on pages 11 and 13, sin is anything that we think, say, and do that separates us from God, knowingly or unknowingly. It's a law. It works, whether I want to believe it's there or not. Right? It doesn't matter. Oh, I'm not a sinner. I'm not this. Sin's not real, blah, blah. Yeah, it is. And it works the same way all the time. And it will lead to the pale horse, death of your soul. And when the soul is dead, you're done. Because now you cannot recall with sufficient force of memory what happened the last time you took a drink. Can you imagine? These are the things that Bill used to talk about. Knowingly or unknowingly. By the end of our drinking careers, we're completely separated from God. Our drinking pattern has become gluttonous, then there's the pages, which simply means that we have underlined, learn to use alcohol to change the way we feel, rather than turning to God for comfort and direction. Alternatively, it may be completely indifferent to God, we may be, and therefore, when tempted, we have no divine inspiration. Then it sends you to another page in the learning pages where you can see all the places the big book talks about inspiration and temptation, but we'll get to those a little later. To keep us from the drink, we cannot recall in the moment of temptation or trivial reason to drink what happened the last time we drank. We have become slaves to temptation. The liar, or disease if you prefer, whispers, and we react. That reaction is the first drink, settling into motion the allergic cycle. The drink has to come in the body before the allergy goes. But then once it's in, it's going to pull. Once again, read through the steps by the book, and then I send you back to the steps. We just did that. The excerpts of the following pages where Bill Wilson describes it throughout the big book. So then on the next page, I show all the different places where Bill Wilson talks about the strange mental blank spot. So let me just read these, and then we'll wrap it up for tonight. Yeah? No, we still have another half hour. We'll wrap it up for 2 minutes. First one, we already read in Bill's story. I was part of life at last. In the midst of my excitement, I discovered liquor. I forgot. That is a strange mental blank spot. Here we just hit this one on page 5. This is what sent us here. Could have jumped in any one of those pages. Shortly afterwards, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Strange mental blank spot. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I'd taken it. Was I crazy? Yeah. Yes. Here's the next one. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital, broke man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of the first drink. The strange mental blank spot. It was Armistice Day and I was off again. Now here, these next two hit the nail right on the head. The fact is, and there's a half dozen, 4, 5, 6 facts in the book. A fact is an indisputable truth. The fact is, for most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost their power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower has become practically non-existent. We are unable, at certain times, not all the time, to bring into consciousness the sufficient force of memory, the suffering and humiliation of a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. Bang. We cannot remember the suffering or humiliation. We are without defense. It kind of calls it. Here's the one that calls out the strange mental blank spot and why I call it this. So this is AA number 3, a guy named Bill Dotson they're talking about on page 42. We'll read about Bill. They had said that though I would raise a defense because, you know, the key word up in that other paragraph is at certain times I was unable. Sometimes the real alcoholic can control his drinking. If there's a tempter, isn't it better to let you do things sometimes and not tempt you? Isn't that the way the tempter might work? Come on, have a drink. It'll be okay. And then other times he says nothing. And you have 1 or 2 and you're done. The insidious temptation. Come on now. You can eat that apple. It ain't going to hurt you. He truly didn't say you would die. Come on. They had said that though I would raise a defense, it would one day give away for some trivial reason for having a drink. So this is the other way that it happens. A trivial reason. The cat with the ball of yarn. 1, we don't remember. 2, we play with the thought. Well, just that did happen and more. For what I had learned about alcoholism, did not occur to me at all. Go to a meeting, call your sponsor. In that moment, when the strange mental blank spot comes, you ain't going to remember to do those things either. God will protect you or he will not. If he's present in your life, he will. I knew from that moment that I had the alcoholic mind. In the chapter of the wives, it says if you still have an alcoholic mind, there's something wrong with the spirituality of your program. The alcoholic mind is just what we just described, and it comes from our drinking pattern and the way we lived. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help me during those, there it is, strange mental blank spots. We miss it because we no longer talk about sin the way we used to in Alcoholics Anonymous. When we read it in Bill's story on page 11, we jump right by it like it's not a thing. We don't study the words, we don't understand the words, and we're certainly not willing to sit down with somebody and have a conversation about them in a way that's meaningful. If you're satisfied that you are a real alcoholic, if you have those 3 things, begin to dwell on the hopelessness. Now he's teaching, this is out of working with others. It's showing us how to work with others. Show him from your own experience the queer mental conditions surrounding the first drink, preventing the normal functioning of the will. The strange mental blank spot. It's the key. You've got to really understand how to talk about the spiritual break. The man in the bed was told that his acute poisoning from which he had suffered, how it deteriorated the body of an alcoholic and warped his mind. Mind and body problem. There was much talk about the strange mental state preceding the first drink. That's in the back of A Vision for You when they're witnessing to AA number 3 again. So Bill talks about the strange mental blank spot on a number of occasions. We're 33 minutes in. I'm going to take a break right now. We're going to go ahead and cut the